Okay, are we live?
Yes.
Awesome. We are live. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining our next level session. Today, I think it's the seventh. Oh, that's hard to say. The seventh next level session that we are hosting. We are going to talk about video game production today, and I'm honored to have three awesome guests with me today. I hope I'm going to pronounce everybody's name correctly. So I'm joined by Laura Bulaka from Pronoia from Sweden.
Yep.
Hi. Marilena Cassetta from King Arts
Hi.
Games in Germany, and Tessa Abraham from King Art Games in Germany.
Hello.
So great of you to join us. Quick note about what this even is. Our next level sessions are a monthly streaming format that we started doing in the beginning of this year. And for the last 3 editions, we've been doing it on Twitch and also uploading the recordings to YouTube. So if anybody is interested in watching those, I highly recommend checking out our YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining our community, you can also do that as well. We are doing this for If Game SH, which is a little association for game development and esports in the little tiny state of Schleswig-Holstein, but anybody is welcome to join our community, even if you're not from Schleswig-Holstein. Yeah, just join our Discord server and let's chat. That would be great. That's enough with the advertising, though. Let's start talking. We usually start with a little introduction round, and I ask everybody just who they are and what they do. So maybe Laura, you can start. Who are you, and what do you do?
So, yeah, my name is Laura Bularka, and I've been in the video games industry professionally active since the year 2000, and a game producer specifically since 2009, working for companies such as FunLab/Activision, and then in Italy for Milestone, and then in Sweden for several studios, and then I moved on, and now I have my own company, and I work only for myself and only. Yeah, and my company is called Pronoia. It's the opposite of paranoia, and I bring utopias to life. And I strayed away a little bit from games currently because I published a board game and a comic book. But I'm
Oh,
working
that's not
on
very fun.
I'm working on a video game now also. Yeah.
All right. Just a quick note, I see that Knut joined us. Welcome. Great of you to join us. Tessa, you're hosting the stream today. Can you
Yeah.
somehow hide people who don't show their videos so we just have the four of us in the
I
Twitch
don't know.
stream? It should be a right click and then the second one on the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
No worries. So Laura, I saw on your website that I'm just going to quote this: Pronoia designs, curates, and publishes artistic expressions and ideal words, mostly in the form of games.
Of ideal
How did
words.
yeah? Oh, sorry, of ideal worlds. How do you arrive at that mission statement? Why do you want to make games like that?
I think it's needed. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to bring hope and optimism in the world. And I think when I started the company, because of my experience of, 20 plus years in video games, I thought that, okay, it's going to be video games and I'm going to make video games and stuff like that. But then, uh, you know, uh, other products stumbled upon me and I couldn't say no. And so the reason I'm doing this is because I think we need more optimistic, hopeful, conflict-free kind of stories. And Zesta as a board game is a covert utopia that kind of envisions class equality. The Lost Sunday is a fairy tale inspired comic book about working too much with a very, very optimistic answer. And the game that's coming soon on Steam, it's not even really a game, it's a magical comic book library with game-like elements where you will be able to read The Lost Sunday and other comic books that I hope to publish in the future. So I'm very my company is cross media now. And if
Awesome.
somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to make a super optimistic movie about, you know, um, a fully united world where no one ever, thinks about conflicts and war and whatnot," I'll do it. Or if you come and
Awesome.
whatever it takes. If it's a
Yeah,
utopia, if it gives hope, I'll I want it.
that's so cool. I love that. Did you find that your experience in game development helps you creating other stuff like comic books and movies and everything you do?
Yeah, it's I'm quite fascinated that ever since I kind of broadened my specter, I can see a lot of opportunities to apply my game development knowledge and production knowledge, for example, in the products that I'm making, even though they're not games. And vice versa, I think I'm learning a lot from the comic book industry and from the board game industry that's very easily and nicely applied to games and game development in general. So I think that you might encounter me at GTC or something with a comic book and a board game or whatnot. But why not? I mean, I think we all kind of enjoy this kind of stuff, even if we professionally make games. So
Mm.
I'm having big world domination plans.
Big world domination plans.
Yeah.
That sounds so cool. Yeah, we've been like approached by a project from Italy who want board game design. So this is something that we, if everything works out, we might do as well, like doing other stuff except for video games. So I'm very excited to hear all your lessons learned from doing production for not just video games, or what you've learned from that. So thank you so much for joining. So
Thank you
cool.
for having me.
Oh. We are also joined by Marilena and Tessa. You are both from King Art Games. So maybe Tessa, you can start. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay. Hi, I'm Tessa. I work for King Art Games in Bremen. I worked on Iron Harvest, which is an RTS. I started working on the core game in 2019 and then switched to the DLCs and expansions. And right now, I'm mostly working on our in-house developed production tool, which is called Forgify, where I'm more in the process of like software production. So yeah, that most of my time, and then I'm also part of the production of an unannounced game project. But this is currently not my main focus. So yeah.
All right. Sounds cool. Marilena, who are you and what do you do at King Art Games?
Yeah, I am Marilena, obviously. I work in the same company as Tessa, would you know? And I've been with the company since 2018. I started as an intern and then as a working student, and then I could stay to pursue basically my career as a producer. I also started working. My very first project was Iron Harvest. I also worked on the DLC, mostly in art production, which is probably the area which I feel like I want to focus more. This is an area that I really like and enjoy. And for the next unannounced project, I will be probably doing the same again. And here I am.
That's so cool. So cool that you two could join us, especially because you are from the same company. I think that gives us a very unique perspective to talk about having two people from the same company and the same panel. The way I just understood it, you are right now you're working on different projects. Is that right?
Yes.
Within the company.
Yeah.
Did you work on the same project at some point in the past?
Yeah,
Iron
Harvest.
On Iron Harvest. Tessa, maybe you can talk a little bit about like how did that work? Like being a team of producers
Yeah.
together managing what other people are doing.
So when I joined the company, Marlena joined like full time too. So I was a working student in the beginning, and like shortly after, both of us joined like in the producing team, we got a senior producer, which was coordinating our team. So he was like coordinating who is responsible for which department. Like you're responsible for art, you're responsible for coders, and he was overseeing everything. So we were like juniors at that time. So we took part of like small snippets, and then he had the oversight of everything. And yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Marilena, would you agree? That was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sure, let's not deny here that at the beginning it was all a bit chaotic. I mean, it's a game project, it's the games industry, it's always a bit chaotic, especially when our producer, who left in the first place, had a baby. And then for a certain amount of time before the new producer could get on the project, it was a bit difficult for us, to find basically put a foot into the door, kinda, or find our place and our niche in the project. Also because we had to get to know the team and the project a bit better. But that worked out over time, and of course, I mean, it's not easy as always, but it worked out over time, and I think the result of the project speaks for itself, that we managed very well.
Nice. It's a great game. I think it released about
you.
a year ago. I think September 2020. Is that right?
Yeah.
I've seen on the blog of Iron Harvest that you're still pushing out updates, like console releases. I've seen roadmaps for the coming weeks with content updates and stuff. If any of you are working on that project right now, or even if you've just had worked on it, how do you keep up with that? It feels like that's a lot of mini release dates coming, and you're promising a lot of stuff to the players. How do you make sure you keep up with that schedule?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So of course we have a producer working full time on that to schedule all the releases together with management and with the publisher. Of course, we have a live team that basically produces the content, and this is basically how we push out all the content. So while Tessa and I are not directly hands-on on the project, we get to hear how things go. And while there's still, since we have 2 more projects running, plus the live service of Iron Harvest, of course, there are always these kind of resource issues. Oh yeah, we would need this resource to do this small work for the next release. Can we, figure something out? And these are like, the tiny issues that come along with live service. Otherwise, it's definitely not as stressful as preparing a big real release.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
definitely. I can just agree. It's like we have a good like planning schedule in our producing team. So like Marilena said, we talk with each other like even over the project, and then we manage to get the right people in the right projects at the right time, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay. How big? Just very quick question. How big are the teams that you are managing right now? That you're producing right now?
Like,
can you say that?
Like us or like the project?
Our teams that we're supervising, or like overall the projects?
The team that you are supervising.
So for my team right now, it's basically the same size, kind of, that we had in Iron Harvest, which is about 7 to 10 people. However, as soon as we enter main production, this can change. It could grow. Also because we will probably do things a bit differently than before, working more with, feature teams and all that stuff. So it might grow a bit more. I can't really say, but around the 10 to 15 people maybe for me.
Okay.
but also sometimes cross teams, depending on if one of us needs help, then sometimes we, jump in and help out.
Is that the same for you, Tessa?
No, since I'm currently working on like the software department more, like with web programming and stuff, well, we only have 2 people there, and
Okay.
yeah, having a look over that.
Okay. Laura, I saw that your company is a bit smaller. How many people are you overseeing right now?
Right now my company is me, myself, and only. So depending on how you count that those are, but I work with freelancers and I choose and select teams which I scale. But at the biggest team I handled was about 100 people. As
100 people.
yeah, and the smallest, I did do a lot of projects with 1 or 2 people only.
Okay.
And
What
everything in
was
between.
what was harder, 2 people or 100 people?
The outlook is a little bit different. It
Mhm.
depends. I think each has its own challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that you use a lot of different methodologies when you have to do it for 100 people than just for 2, and it has to be a bit more high level, or what's the main difference?
Well, the very nice thing we when I did manage the big team was that management, like upper management, the owners of the company and publishers and stuff like that, needed waterfall kind of management.
Hmm.
And they needed to see exactly where everyone's at, how much money was spent, budget reporting, constant budget reporting, and stuff like that. But the team functioned much better with on an agile methodology.
Mhm.
So I implemented kind of a hybrid system where
Mhm.
I could get what I needed for the waterfall reporting, but I used agile slash Scrum with the team, and that
Okay.
worked very well. I mean, the project was actually the only project of the company, I think, that was delivered on time and passed all
Oh,
TRC submissions in from the first time, and we didn't even crunch that much. So
Cool.
that sounds wonderful.
that's
A
one
dream
thing.
project. You just talked about waterfall and agile and Scrum. I can imagine some of our viewers have ever heard these terms. Can you maybe, in very few words, try to describe the difference, or maybe shall we all try together? um,
We can participate, I guess. So basically, waterfall takes an approach that's away from the actual client or player. Let's take it like that, and it essentially puts the team in a box that says, okay, 2 years from now on or 3 years from now on, you are in this box, and you have this like way huge list of features and assets and blah 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 that you need to do, and you're kind of
mhm.
like in a tiny factory that just delivers, and that's why it's called
Mm,
waterfall, because you have, okay,
okay.
feature X generates that, and we need that kind of assets, that blah, um, but you're not essentially focusing on necessarily stable
Mm,
releases or stable builds. You don't, and you don't show, like you don't technically, you don't have a testing component with the community
mhm,
involved in the process. Um, Agile splits the stuff in smaller playable bits and pieces, and it has a big focus on very, very rapid user testing. So basically, what happens with Agile is that you constantly keep an updated build, that you constantly make sure that your actual players play it in an environment
mm,
as close to release as possible. So whenever you have new features, new stuff that you launch, you make sure that they're as close to playable as possible. Um, and you kind of are flexible in the project because you can scale it up or down, and it's
mm,
much more playable, especially when you have games as a service and you have these DLC plans and everything,
mm.
because you can split the game in smaller chunks and you have a minimum viable product, and then you add stuff and add, test, fix, release, add, test,
Okay,
fix, release. That's kind of, yeah.
that's a cycle.
Yeah.
All right. So waterfall is like having a big list, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then in the end, maybe you have a product. And agile is creating a playable thing as early as possible, doing it in chunks, and then having people play it, provide feedback, and then just keep on improving, keep on adding.
Yeah.
That's
Kind of
the.
like that.
And you were saying you were using waterfall in one project, but then switched to agile, and that is
No,
maybe what you're using mostly.
I was using both in the same project.
Oh. Okay.
Agile has the merit because I was communicating, as I said, like Agile was for the management team that I was reporting, and I had to have very clear understanding of the budget and what was done and what still needs to be done and how much the artists costs and how many assets do we need to create and blah, all that stuff. And that was it was Microsoft project. That's the holy
Mhm.
grail of waterfall scheduling.
Yeah.
And Gantt charts and stuff like that. But with
Mhm.
the development team, I actually had sprints and actually used agile methodology, and I actually managed to split the stuff in a way that worked for the team. Actually,
All right. I just saw in chat, Jokey Buddy wrote, "Waterfall is we know the future, and Scrum is we don't know the future." I think that's pretty well. And then Ronja added, "Kanban is we have one huge Trello board," which is true as well.
the reality is that when it comes to game production and stuff, because I'm very opinionated when it comes to this, it's a little bit like it's a lot of philosophy and almost religion when it comes to project management, you know. So it's about how you think about bringing a project to life, essentially. So it's no hard set facts, but methodologies are kind of like rituals, religion a
Mm.
little bit, like beliefs on how a project should be brought to life, essentially.
Yeah, when I first read up on the Scrum methodology, I read a lot about rituals and things are supposed to be like this and things are supposed to be like that, and then this is how it works. And the more I talked to people about it, the more I heard that everybody's kind of adjusting it to the way
Yeah.
it works best for their team. And maybe Tessa, you can talk a little bit about that. I think you are also using Agile and Scrum in your development. Are you using the baseline textbook version of it, or are you using some adjusted system?
So in the software thingy I'm currently doing, it's like, I wouldn't say it's like agile Scrum, but it's like more of that sprinting, checking, rework, like the almost textbooky, yeah, almost. I'm not sure, but in game development, actually, we do almost the same as Laura, sorry, said, because we also mix up waterfall and Scrum. Like we use MS Project, which is like Gantt charts, and you have to follow like processes and stuff. And we also use like processes and workflows in our projects, especially when it comes to asset production and stuff. We rely a lot on those things. Yeah, so it's also a mix of both, I would say.
I see. And we've talked about this a little bit before we started the stream, but Marilena, I believe for the team that you're mentioning, it's pretty much the same because it's the same company. Is that correct?
Yes, while for some teams, so this is a tricky part. It really comes down, at least at King Art, it really comes down which teams you're working with, what kind of work philosophy they have, what kind of work dynamic they have, and what kind of projects they are on. If sprinting with them is actually something suitable for the team, and I'm not talking for a big team, I'm talking for the smaller teams working for smaller features. right? Or for a small prototype, like these kind of things. If these are actually suited for doing sprints or not, while we always suggest and recommend teams to sprint with us, they still have the choice to say, let's try it this way, because like a different way, basically, because we feel like this works very well. And the first try is, okay, we'll let you, try to be as autonomous as possible, see if that works out. If that works out for the team, if they can, achieve their milestones and all the tasks within a certain time, we do not interrupt that process while we still do some agile methodologies with them. Like, I'm just talking about sprints here. We still do stand-ups. We still track. We still calculate the velocities to see how much do they, what is the burn down for the team. The only difference here is that, for some teams, sprinting works better. For other teams, they just like to have their Trello boards. And for other teams, it's like, oh, we just like to have a whiteboard. And other teams are, we just, do it this way, we do it this way. And while they communicate with us and we are all, in control of the situation, we most of the time try to give them as much freedom in their methodologies as possible. And if it doesn't work out, we, try to, adapt them more to this sprint methodology to have the situation a bit more under control.
Okay, so the way I see it, in the end, it's all about getting the project done and getting a lot of tasks done and making sure that everybody on the team is working together and nobody is blocked, nobody's waiting for anybody else. So it's really about breaking down this huge project into small tasks, into small, maybe some people call it user stories. We can talk about that later. Into small manageable chunks, and then pretty much just saying, you do this, you do this, you do this, or maybe giving people the freedom to say, I do this, I do this, I do this. I've heard, I think all of you talk about sprints now, and we haven't really defined what a sprint is for people who don't really know it. What is a sprint? Anybody want to answer? Tessa, maybe you?
Should I? Okay. So for me personally, a sprint is like, or like a general, a sprint is like a time box. You have like 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. You set up, and then you have your backlog probably, where like everything is listed that you have to do. And you hopefully have priority in that backlog, and it's not just a list of things to do. And then you pick stuff in your sprint, and you prioritize again probably in that sprint. So what can we do in 2 weeks, and what do we want to do, and how is this manageable? And probably also, does it fit together? Because you can't do like 15 different things because people need to think about them and have it on their mind. So I don't think it's like a good thing to come in every morning and be like, what do I have to do again? Oh, I should read into that. And then it will take like half of the day to just read into that. So yeah, probably about 1 topic or 2 topics in 1 sprint. And then And then, work that off. And then after the 2 weeks are finished, or 1 week, or whatever time box you have a look and then see, what have we done? What is finished? What's not finished? Why is that so? And then you test and see if everything works out the way you wanted it or not.
All right. So you're talking about like having 2 weeks of time and then deciding we are going to commit to completing these tasks in these 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks you say, or you see how it went, and maybe you take some learnings from that.
Yeah, most of the time.
At Off the Beaten Track, we are also doing 2-week sprints, and we are also working very closely with another company who's doing 2-week sprints. I've also heard you talk about 2-week sprints. Laura, is that also the number of weeks that you are recommending?
Oh, I don't want to recommend, because it depends on the team what sprint size works best. I now because my team is very small and we can be very flexible. I have 1 week sprints.
Ah.
But in other, like for example, when I was working with bigger teams, sometimes you focus more on a month, because if the project is big, then you need time, especially in the beginning, to actually make something that's actually playable and usable and growable, so to say. So then maybe 2 weeks is too little in the beginning. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So when we have sprints of any number of weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we all sit down as a team and want to decide what we are going to work on in these 2 weeks. How do we decide how much of that work is going to fit into those 2 weeks? How do we decide which tasks we want to pick for these 2 weeks? I guess that's one of the big questions a producer has to work on and to answer. Marilena, maybe you can start talking a little bit about how do we actually sit down and plan a sprint or even the next couple of days of work? How does it work?
So, so in the first place, before all of that happens, you of course get all the basic informations on, okay, what needs to be done from the stakeholder, or in that case, also the PO, the project owner. And as soon as you have this, the project owner is basically the person who is in charge of the vision of basically the project of the feature that's this thing that needs to be done within the sprint. Okay, this is how I wanted to have it. This is my user story. I want the player to be able to do a flick flag when he jumps or whatever. Because, for example, it's like a weird example, but so in that case, the producer, at least at KingArt, we are more on the Scrum Master side to, provide that everything works flawlessly, the team knows what they have to do. And at first, you don't want to pick everything out of their nose, right? At the very first thing is that you do is when you assemble the backlog is you ask them the right questions so that they start brainstorming about, okay, if we want a player to be able to make the flick flag, that means that we have to talk to the animator. Okay, the coders need to talk to the animators. Yeah, okay, we will do it this way. The animators need to animate it that way. They have to exchange what needs to be done. And then you can even, start to think, should we even split the story or not? Should we do subtasks or not? And this basically develops this conversation. What is also very helpful is to look at it. That's not necessarily a thing that you do at the very, very beginning, the very first sprint of the project, but during the project is to always show your progress on screen. So while we do most of our calls digitally, also because of the current COVID situation, for example, with the coders right now, what we do is at the end of a sprint, we look at, okay, what did you do? So at the end of the sprint, for us, we do the review and then we define the new sprint in one meeting. You can, of course, choose however you want to do it, but that pretty much works good for us. So they screen their screen, they basically show what they're doing, and everyone gets an idea of what that person is working on right now. And that also, brings people to start a conversation, to brainstorm and define, okay, so the next important step for our next sprint would be this user story in the backlog. So let's take this and put it in the sprint. Can we do it? Let's estimate it. It fits? Okay, let's put it in there. And while we're there, let's try it, as Tessa mentioned earlier as well, let's try to make the sprint give it a theme, give it a specific name to say, okay, this sprint is all about player animation, like character animation, main character mechanics. All right, then we put everything that fits in that 2-week sprint into basically the grooming board, the sprint, and if it fits, work it out, and we can also split the task, the user stories down in multiple subtasks. That's how we do it, and how it works pretty well right now.
Okay. I've been working with sprints for a while now, and in my experience, it's sometimes hard to give a sprint a theme, like you're talking about. Like, it sounds so easy. Let's do everything about animation. But in a project where people are doing so different things, we have composers, we have programmers, we have artists, we have animators, da 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 da. So many people doing so many different things. I found it very hard in the past to find one theme to rule
Yeah.
them all. So right now, I'm doing 2 sprints at the same time. One of them called a cinnamon bun, and the other one is cornet. So we don't have any themes. We just have clumsy
Funny
pun
names.
names.
That's I mean, that's fine. I mean, ideally for a big project, that's the way you would do it. I think the my example there was a bit very specific, but we have these tiny issues as well where we're like, okay, how should we call this? Because there are very different things that need to be done at the moment that are not really fitting with each other, the puzzle pieces, and in that case, we have to think, okay, do we split the sprint, or do we basically call it player animation / enemy design. Okay,
Yeah.
these two things need to be done in one sprint. So then we give it 2 names. As long as it's not too many different topics in one sprint, I think it's manageable.
Okay. Thinking about the multidisciplinary nature of game development, and also you're talking about fitting so many different things into one sprint. Laura, I did some stalking before this, and I read some of your blog posts, and in one of them you talk about the creative nature of being a producer, and I quote, you write, "You might not code, make art, or design as much as you wish, but you are a crucial part of everything involved in making your game, which grants you a wider, stronger perspective than anyone else on the team." Which kind of starts the question for me, like, you're as a producer, you're maybe not a perfect programmer, maybe not a very skilled artist, very skilled musician, and yet you're involved with everything in the production. How do you make sure that you handle all these disciplines with like the delicacy that they require? Like, how do you plan work for somebody whose job you don't necessarily understand? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was actually thinking to start a conversation a little bit on a more wider perception of what a producer is and does. Because I think like this is the important thing that we need to talk about, and why a producer is needed, especially if teams are big and interdisciplinary, and if the project is huge and scary, and how do you actually even start on it? How do you do everything? So essentially, I'm no longer a producer. I'm a business owner now. So that's a bit of a different thing. But I love being a producer because it's generally the one role that you can have which grants you a good understanding of everything that's happening in the game. And that's why I think one of the most important tasks of being a producer is to make sure that everyone is in line with what the game is about, the vision of the project, what it is that we're doing. Of course, you have project owners, you have Scrum masters, you have all sorts of roles depending on the kind of um, methodology that you apply, and that always differs from company to company. So you will never ever be able to say, okay, I'm a producer, I'm doing these producer things, and I can work wherever I want as a producer because that's what a producer does. That's not so. But one thing that's generally very good to do is to not only be responsible yourself, that you understand what the project is about, where the project is heading, what the stakeholders want and need, and where are we heading and stuff like that. But it's also your responsibility to make sure that everyone in the team, absolutely everyone, is constantly reminded and on board and has this picture of the vision of the project very clearly in their mind. And it doesn't matter that you are a coder or a composer or whatnot, because sometimes, especially in big teams and especially when you are deep in production and all you care about is those 100 types of buildings that you need to finish by the end of the month and stuff like that. You get this like, I don't fucking care what the game is about. Like, let me finish my my 100 buildings or what is it that you're doing. But I think like the role of a producer is to make sure that absolutely everyone in the team is on board and is in love with what they're doing, essentially. And this takes so much communication. So basically, a producer is like sometimes it's funny because I've been oftentimes in situations where like what a producer does. Okay, well, a producer makes sure that if this person is here and that person is there, you'd think they would communicate, right? But they don't. So a producer takes those persons and faces them on one with another, a programmer and a composer or sound effects designer or whatnot, and make sure that they talk, and make sure that both of the people or all the people are aligned with where we're going, and so they can contribute with their skills. And as we were talking before starting the stream, that the team has optimal conditions to deliver what they need to deliver. And I think a lot of this has a lot to do with mental state of the team. You have to have a happy team. Happy teams produce happy games. Unhappy teams produce very unhappy games, and you can see that definitely when you play it. Which is why one of the very important tasks of a producer is, order the pizza.
Feed your team.
Feed your team. Yeah, in that note, I have a
pizza?
very quick. No, I don't have a pizza here, but I have.
I do. Here.
Book recommendation. About you were talking about happy teams and happy production, and this is a book. It recently came out, a playful production process, and it's all about making games in a happy, positive, healthy way, and I can really recommend.
Oh, that's super nice. Thank
this
you so
book
much.
And also a talk. It's by Richard LeMarchand, and he also gave a talk which you can find on YouTube, which is called something. I don't know the exact title. It's something in creating happy games, something like that. So I can recommend that. It's about keeping the people on the project happy. And I also love what you were talking about, the vision of the game, like keeping people reminded of what they are working on and not in their tunnel vision of 100 buildings. Tessa, is that something that you have also encountered working on Iron Harvest? People in their tunnel vision?
Absolutely. And I think that's like one of the most challenging things to do, because on your work, you have like your work day, which has like only these 8 hours, and you're like, okay, I have to do these 7 things, and I also have to like make sure everybody knows what we're working on and everybody knows like where the state of the game is, because that's also a big problem, especially due to COVID. You don't see everybody else, so you don't know what they're working on, and if you lose like the big picture, you get like uninterested in it. So I feel like that, because when I don't talk to like one of the departments for a month, I'm like, what are they even working on? I don't know that. I should ask them, because like the sheer interest, I think, in the game keeps you going. And if you know what everybody's working on, like the tunnel vision phase, because I do the buildings for like the 7 maps we do, and we need that, and the one is in a desert and the other one is in an icy area, stuff like that. And I think like working gets easier if you like get the vision. But you have to make sure that the team gets that too, because it's easy for me as a producer to walk in and be like, hey, what you working on? But like the maybe artist intern or something like that, he doesn't walk through the coders and is like, hey, what are you guys working on?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like one of the hardest things, I think, for producers, to make sure like everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and also it's interesting, like generally.
Like so many things, it seems to be about communication.
Yeah.
And it's only gotten harder in the past 1.5 years. Like It used to be that we would just look over people's shoulder walking around the office and see, hey, what you're working on this cool thing. What is that? And start a conversation and maybe talk to them, or maybe just talking to them, grabbing coffee. Tessa, you seem distracted, but if you can take another question.
Totally.
Did you find new ways in the last 1.5 years to keep the conversation going, to show people the vision of the project?
It's hard.
How did you manage?
It's hard. Like we have I don't know if I can say the software. We have a software we can talk to each other, and that's like a funny thing to do because you can send gifs and stuff like that. But you lose, like the contact to everybody. Since a few months now, we have like a Friday coffee break, which is really funny because we all go into one channel and then get subdivided into smaller channels and then talk to random people, which is super funny because last week I met like our chef and then one of the interns, and it was like, what a funny, like, and now you have to find a topic to talk about, which is we say it's not about work, so you have to like get in contact with the people, and then that's like a funny way to do it, but it's actually hard. We also have a song challenge every Friday, which is also really funny, where we get like a theme and then everybody has to suggest a song, and then we talk about that, so everybody gets into conversation again. So that's like out of the projects, but in the project it's like hard. So we have these channels where we talk about it, but yeah, out of meetings it's really hard to contact each other, because like normally I'm sitting like next to Marilena or something, and then we just chat about everything that's going on. And now in home office, I don't call her like all day and be like, what are you doing right now? So that doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, the little things like these help, but I don't think there's like a cool way to like have that office feeling out of the office. It's hard.
Seems like you go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, I think it's very interesting what COVID did, and I think it depends from team to team. Because on the other hand, I've seen many people, and me personally, I'm extremely happy when I know for sure that no one will pop up and hey, what you're doing? I'm very focused. Leave me alone. But I think it's very challenging for you, Tess and Marilena, to have had a team that you have worked with like physically, and then COVID started, so you had to reinvent new ways to work. Yeah, I think this is the most challenging situation possible.
Yeah, it's gotten better over the time, which is like a long time now. I think nobody of us was like thinking about that in the beginning. So we were not looking at the beginning for different ways, because all of us were like, oh, we're coming back soon, so nobody cared. And then then I think we got like a few task forces actually to speak about their topics and be like, hey, what can we do to like get the contact back? And that was a good thing of the company to do, because actually I wasn't thinking about that hard because I don't live alone, but people who live alone at the company had like a harder time, especially because nobody was like actively contacting. So yeah.
When it goes back to holding a vision and stuff like that, what in my experience, what helps the most is to make sure that you have regular build reviews, and you usually do that after a sprint, and to make sure that the game, like the state of the game that you're playing right now together with the team, is as close as possible to the real environment. So for example, if you're launching on Steam, have a development branch on Steam. If you are doing it on consoles, make sure that you try to play on consoles and stuff like that. And also, it's very, very nice. Like, of course, when it comes to very large team, this becomes a little bit challenging, but it's very nice to play the game together. Set aside time to play the game as a team without any barriers and without any constraints when it comes to feedback or ideas or anything. When you play the game, when you have build review, you play it as if you're like some random person that is on Steam and just like browsing games and trying it out, and you let all of it out,
Mm.
and that's like the best way to actually, I think, create synergy, create connection between the teams, make sure that the sound designer finally understands what the programmer was talking about when feature X was behaving strangely and blah blah blah. So that sparks, in my
Mm.
opinion, the best conversations. So one advice, I don't know if anyone is interested in producing, is if you don't want to like get boxed up into what you're doing, like, okay, I'm doing shaders and I don't care about the game, I'm just whatever. Play the game with the team.
Mhm.
See what happens.
It's incredibly helpful. We at our team recently had a new person joining, and then just last week, for the first time, we were playing the build together in a video call. And for this person, she talked about like how cool it was to see everything falling together, because she had only seen her art and she had only seen some music files and maybe some screenshots, but seeing everything come together and be an actual playable game and an actual experience is always such a cool moment. It's also a great moment for the team to see everything coming together, but it's also a good way to just look at what do we have, what should we improve, what can we improve, what are the next steps, and then we go into sprints and improvements again and again and again. For us, sometimes it takes a little while to land that first build. Do you maybe have tips on how to speed that up? I think ideally we have a first build after just a couple of weeks and then keep on improving, but somehow we just want to add this one thing before we call it a build, or this one thing, or this is missing. Like what are your recommendations or best practices? Does any one of you have an idea on how to keep the first build very small but practicable? Maybe Marilena, do you have an idea?
I think it really depends on how your workflow is. For us, we usually do the tiniest steps. Yeah, we try to define, okay, what do we want in a prototype, for example? And we, as soon as, we have the first concept, the game design concepts and all that stuff written down, we try to go along to define the first couple tasks and see, okay, if basically also making small sprints and see, okay, let's just build this after we finish that sprint and see how it goes. And then that usually happens. We build overnight. I don't know if that's a thing that a lot of studios do. Since I'm not very involved into the coders department, I can't really say what their dynamic is at the moment, but they're building fairly constantly. And even if it's like a bad build, if it barely has anything, it is something. It's what do you call it? It's not something that is touchable, but somehow it is. It is your first small step towards the bigger picture. And even if it doesn't work, it crashes, you can kind of see, okay, that's not working, that's not working, that is working, and you can start creating your your checklist for the next sprint or milestone on what you want to improve. So I'm actually as long as no one with more experience in that topic, please correct me if I'm wrong, says it's counterproductive. For me, I would say it is actually productive to make a build at least once a week or so and see how does it go. How's your progress? How's our progress on that?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea. You should always, if possible, you should, like, at the end of the day have a build and see how it works.
Yeah.
Like it's crucial. But when it comes to, for example, prototyping, in my experience, it pays first and foremost to leave ample time in the beginning of the project to really talk with the team and really narrow down what makes the game unique. And that's what you prototype. essentially, because that's the idea that you need to test for yourself. Okay, I want to make this fun game. What's the fun in the game? Does it work?
Yeah, test it. Is it actually fun, or is it just
Test our core pillars. Are they good or not?
yeah.
And usually when you have a team and you have been already developing games together and stuff like that, you have a lot of code base you can take from. Like, for example, if you make an RTS or like, I don't know, first person shooter or whatnot, you already have the, movement mechanic, you have an avatar, you have the view, you have everything. Then you can really reuse whatever you have and truly focus on the thing that makes the game unique and fun, specifically that one. Because that's where you need to head towards. That's what you need to test first and foremost. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very, very a very, very good idea to have a build like every week or maybe even every day in an automated fashion. I heard a lot about nightly builds. We are
We have
working
that.
on a project that has that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see some questions in the chat. Dear chat, feel free to ask questions at any time. We will ask them when we have time here. So Ronja asks, how do you decide to subdivide big teams into smaller teams? How do the sub teams communicate? Yeah, hi Ronja.
Ronja!
So how do these sub teams communicate? How do they form? Maybe Laura can take this because you mentioned working on a 100-person team. Was that one big team, or did you divide it down into sub teams?
Oh, okay. The idea is this is also a lot of studio philosophy and studio running philosophy. Some studios have small cross-disciplinary teams that are responsible fully for fragment sections of the game. Other studios have, okay, this is the programmers, this is the artists, this is the sound people, blah blah blah. And they have a matrix kind of development so that you can scale up or down depending on where you are in the beginning of the project, middle of the project, end of the project. Because in the beginning of the project, you basically have a very small skeleton team, base team, which is generally composed of the people that will later become the lead of the department. So you have a lead programmer, you have a lead designer, you have a lead sound, you have lead effects and stuff like that. And then with those people, you start to prototype the core thing that you want to kind of test out. And once you reach a stable idea of what you want to do, and so you know exactly, okay, how many levels, how many features, how many blah, 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 what's the scope and scale of the project, then you can scale up and you can add, more disciplines on a per need basis. But then again, like it depends from studio to studio. There are studios who prefer to have very tiny teams who are cross-disciplinary and they just deliver a thing that can be integrated. But most studios that I have seen are generally quite divided on profession, essentially. So artists with artists, programmers with programmers.
Okay.
But I am personally like personally don't like, I would at least suggest like stray away from the idea of physically separating the teams because there's so much merit and so much wonderful results to get when you put programmers and artists, for example, together. Sometimes they have very different outlooks on things and very different opinions on how things should be done. But if you get them to communicate with each other and kind of understand each other's point of view, wonderful things happen. Which is where, again, the conversation of what the producer does, the producer facilitates communication and keeps the team on track. This is what you do. You put the programmers together with the artists and hope they don't kill each other in a room.
Yeah, even when you subdivide the teams, they should communicate and not just be shelled off. Tessa, you talked about in the beginning about the team sizes at King Art Games and that you have smaller sub-teams of 7 to 10 people, if I recall correctly. How do you make sure that communication goes on between these sub-teams?
Yeah, we've actually both, which Laura talked about. So we have everybody sitting by department currently, and we have task forces, we call them, which are like teams that work on one specific thing. For example, we had a unit task force for Iron Harvest, which was working on our units, looking at them, and then people from different departments come together like once or twice a week, and they talk to each other like even when they're not in the meetings. So they're actually working on the units together. And we have that for different things on the projects, especially in the new projects. We're switching that currently. So I think if we're going back to the office, it will be like sitting in those task forces and not anymore in departments. So maybe we can tell you how it is to sit like coding and artists together in the future.
I recall reading I believe it's the Valve onboarding handbook, which is online and you can look at it. I might be talking about a wrong company, but I think it's Valve, where they have these desks that have wheels. And in the handbooks, they encourage you to move your desk frequently, to sit next to different people, talk to different people, and have all these new impressions and experiences. And I think that's so beautiful.
Great
even
idea,
if you're
but
maybe not in the
with
same
like
task force.
free monitors and
Yeah.
No, but like
That's
the
complicated.
nice thing is that they have the desks on wheels, so you take the whole desk, you know. So, but I wonder how that works.
I think it's creepy. Like
With all the
if
cables and
something is
stuff.
broken,
I got so much stuff on my desk that will all crash down.
true, your desk is like enormous. I want to see that. I think it wouldn't even go through the door.
No, you have to disassemble it.
Great.
I see that we've also answered Jokey Body's question in the chat, so that's cool. Looking at the clock, I think we are entering the third, the last third of this conversation. So let's maybe talk about the last third of production and nearing the end of the production and maybe even releasing a game, hopefully. And sometimes that can be very difficult to do. Sometimes that can be very stressful to do. And again, I'm going to quote Laura's blog a little bit. She writes, the single most terrifying milestone known to the game dev man is the release. A milestone, especially the release kind, means endless crunch, generously dedicated to polish stuff that otherwise was perfectly fine. There has been a lot of discussion about crunch in game development, and I think it's a very difficult topic, but one that's important to talk about, especially when we're talking about how to plan work, how to make sure that the game is released on time. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how we can make sure that we can avoid crunch, if there are even techniques for that, or what can we do to make sure that even the release phase of the game is a happy phase for the team. Maybe Laura, you can start. Do you have any experiences with that?
In my career as a producer, I have always been opposed to crunch. And basically my take on it was like, just don't. And why? Because when you are tired, you tend to make a lot more mistakes than you fix. So this is how bugs happen. And secondly, even if like sometimes you are so focused on having the best game possible and polishing and making sure that everything is nice, but like if even one person of the team starts to crunch and exaggerate, that sets an example for everyone else.
Yeah.
And it sets a kind of a very bad way to kind of look at someone's performance, because ultimately what matters is what's being done and works and it's going to be enjoyed by the players, and not how much time you spend at the office and how many nights have you stayed to fix bugs. So that's my philosophy. Just don't crunch. Make sure that people are rested and responsible with their health and their well-being, and they're not in a manic state of polishing things, which is very easy to slip into at the end of the game, like super easy to slip into. but avoid crunch at all costs.
Yeah. Later in the blog post, you also go on to write that it's important to put your well-being first, even in this phase where the release date is coming closer and closer, and that players should and will understand that. So I think that's really important to just look at the team and make sure that the team is happy, and even the pressure might be there. There are other ways to release that pressure. Maybe Marilena and Tessa, and maybe Marilena can start. How was the release phase of Iron Harvest? Did it go well?
Well, I had to go and get a lot of pizza, that's for sure.
Keeping the team happy.
I would lie to you if I'd say we did not crunch. I mean, that phase inevitably happened. But like not as like other AAA studios who crunch for half a year. That of course that didn't happen. But we had a short time before release that was just very stressful. But the bigger issue there was also that we had some issues with QA. So some people of our QA department left, and we had to hire new ones, and all that transition happened during the release phase. Then we had an outsourcing QA studio that did the work for us, but sometimes they did some sloppy work. And then some of us needed to, sit down in the late hours and test and play, which of course it's fun, but yeah.
Takes your time.
Yeah, it
takes
our time.
I
have to say though, even though you do crunch and it's annoying and stuff, I had the chance to get also a bit closer with some people who stayed there later in the office, talked a lot, and it's kind of it's absolutely counterproductive. It's not productive. However, you have this kind of moment of team building in a certain way. You go through a very difficult phase together. Sometimes after work hours, we're like, you know what? Let's just open a bottle of wine
Drink.
and and test. So while it's not ideal and you shouldn't do it, if you have to do if there's really no other way, try to make it as comfortable as possible for the team.
Yeah, always optional also,
Yeah.
which it was for us. So it was, if you want to leave.
Yeah.
You only have to work your 8 hours. And then like most of the people actually left. So it was,
yeah.
It's a difficult topic, but
yeah,
generally we don't like to do it like at all. And I think in the new projects we look for the topic a lot more, because we're currently looking for a way to have like a maximum limit of like overtime hours and stuff, so that some people who tend to be like, I really want to have the game like be the best game that we can, because they're so over motivated, you have to just send them home and be like, no, you can't do another overtime hour. Goodbye. Somebody else has to do it, or we just leave it. We don't care.
Exactly. There were some people that we actually had to do it like, okay, I understand your motivation on this project. It's very important to us. We appreciate you're, one of the core pillars of the company, but you need to go home. Take care of yourself. That happened.
Absolutely. Do you have some? Oh,
I'm watching the chat a little bit, and so yeah, like this is one of the untold dangers of allowing crunch, even if it's driven by personal initiative and stuff like that. It does create gap in team building, because it isolates the people who are night birds and stay and fix and stuff like that from the people who maybe have a family and have to go home. So it is a danger, in my opinion. Crunch is a failure of management, definitely. It's 100% a failure of management.
Definitely.
Especially when it comes to games. I mean, nobody's life depends on a game being made. Nobody will die. You're not
Mhm.
like, we're not in the, oh my God, if we don't fix that bug, I don't know, a dystopian
Yeah.
something will happen.
Nothing will
So
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
yeah.
Um, did you learn something from that phase that maybe you will take into future projects on how to maybe avoid going into crunch? Like, is there other things that you learned from this?
I think for us, what is happening currently and what I think will definitely prevent us from having the crunch we had in the last project is so since our company grew rapidly in the last couple of years, when the company was still kind of small, everything they had was, I think, 2 or 3 producers, and they were all put on different projects. So every project had one producer. That producer also did on-hands work. Like, you know how it is when you have a small company. Most of the times you wear multiple hats as a developer. And now we grew. We have more producers on the team who can actually, take way more responsibility and work and all the management stuff that comes with the project and try to take care of it and schedule everything on time, making risk analysis, and actually, talking to the stakeholders saying, this is not possible, this might be possible, but we have to do this or this or that. Otherwise, we should, just don't do the feature.
Yeah.
And this is already a big, big improvement to, help us not crunch anymore.
Cool. So, hypothetical question. Let's say crunch is completely off the table. Crunch is not allowed at all, but we have a project that is going over time, and there's no way on earth that we are going to complete the game in its current planned form on to release day. And crunch is completely off the table. Everybody's working 8 hours and then they go home. What would be your top tips for this project to not be a complete failure? Like, how do we save this project? What are our options? Can we extend the time? Can we scrap down features? What would be our best approach for this? Do you have any experiences or opinions? Maybe Tessa, do you want to start?
I would say focus on the things that are important to you and that make the game like fun, or that make the game like, it doesn't have to be fun. If the game is supposed to be serious, make the game serious. Like, make the game what you want it to be. And then I would say make everything else that is like not core pillars optional, and then focus on everything you need, and then top it with like the little cherries you think are like cool or good or whatever you want to have in it, if you have time left for that. Yeah.
Okay. So focus on the core of the game.
I would say so.
Minimum
Yeah.
viable product.
Yeah.
Laura, do you agree, or do you have anything to add?
Well, it depends on the situation, but everything you listed is on the table. Like, ultimately, as I say, as I said before, nobody dies if a game release is delayed. So if that is on the table and it's plausible and doesn't depend on external factors, then extend the deadline. I mean,
Yeah. If you have the option, always do that, like, until you're finished. But like most of the time, you have like stakeholders who are like, "Hey, we have that date planned," or you have like a resource of money and then it's empty. Because people like don't like to work overtime, but they also don't like to work for no money. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, always try to find a way to. I mean, while it's important to have a very strong opinion as a creative director, and having, okay, this, we need to push this idea. And while the team, is also pushing with it, it's important to always bring everyone, down to reality and saying, this is the current state of the project. This is what we can do. this is what basically prioritize everything, right? Say this is what we have to do, this is what we can do, this is what is more trivial, and try not to have feature creeps creeping into the project all the time, because that happens. Because when you're passionate about something, it naturally happens that you think about the small details that could make it even better and stuff. That's only natural, and even important that you do so, and that you write it down somewhere, for later use or something. However, priority here is important to keep up.
Yeah.
I think we touched on the subject a little bit before when we spoke about build reviews. The way I like to do build reviews is like, that's open creativity. Like, all the team can come up with any idea, and it's very important to write it down and capture it. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be done. It means that you just have it written down, and then you have this pool of very interesting feedback that you can go through, and prioritize it. Always prioritize it, because sometimes you have this, and it's very important to have this kind of mentality early on in the project, because you'll be oftentimes in a situation where you feel that this feature is super important and we have to have it, and we have to have it in the game and stuff like that. But then 3 sprints down, you play the build, you realize, nope, you don't have to have it. You really don't.
Yeah.
And also similarly, like, if you teach yourself to be in this mentality, maybe later down the road you realize, hey, that feature we thought about like 3 sprints ago, that's super easy to do, and it fixes all our problems. Yay!
That's the best
Yay.
thing,
Yeah.
Perfect world. Sounds a lot like the scoping of the game should be realistic, maybe, and like when we start planning the game, we should scope it in a way that it's realistic to do in the time that we have. But how do we scope a game? Like when we sit down on a table brainstorming, this is going to be our game. How do we know this is a manageably big game, or maybe we have to scope it down? Like how do we actually like calculate if this game can be created within the time that we have? Do you have any best practices for that? I see Marilena smiling. Do you maybe have experiences with that?
Should ask
Scoping games?
Marilena. She's the pro.
Well, Tessa and I actually had a workshop about it. Yeah, at the I think it was last month at the NRW Mediennetzwerk Skill Tree, and we talked about how to scope a project from the very beginning. And while this topic is very big, to sum it up, you basically start, at least this is what is applicable for King Art that works for us, is that we start with, or the creative direction starts with the vision. This is the project, and I'm making a mind map now. These are the features that I definitely want to have in there. And then the producers and the team go in, also sometimes together in a meeting with the creative director, and basically define every feature basically into the very details. Okay, this feature must have this and that. We want this, we want this, we want this. While this mind map is not complete at all, that's usually the case. Things after you develop the prototype, usually it becomes more. However, this is the very base that we want to work with. And we can scale it up or down. You do that, and then you basically take it and throw it into an Excel sheet and basically make tasks. You build themes, you build epics, you build tasks, and there you can basically, you have your little areas of features. Then you go in and try to estimate it with the teams, and therefore you have different estimating methods for that too. And afterwards you make ballparks, which basically help you create different scenarios for the scope that you have. So you can basically have the scope, and you have a velocity that you can adapt. it's basically a formula, a very long formula in the Excel sheet. And you can calculate on the number of resources, scope, and the beginning, the start of the development. When is the end date of all of the work that needs to be done for that team? And there, if you're uncertain, you say, okay, 2 resources are not enough, let's crank it up to 3, then it calculates for you which is the optimal, like, basically end date for you, and you see, I actually need 3 resources. Or I stay at 2 resources and then I crank the scope down. There are different possibilities, and it's always its own use case. But the ballparks help you to basically see the risk behind a scope. It's a big topic.
Also, like for example, when you work with agile software, and especially if the software knows the team and kind of knows the resources, it also knows the velocity of a certain team. So then you can build a backlog, and some of the available tools around can split you up, can give you an estimated delivery time for that. And some softwares are very nice, like they have big deadlines and release markers and stuff like that, which when you are late, they turn red and scream in your face, hey, do something with me. And stuff like so. You can also essentially build a backlog, try to estimate, preferably using point systems, and you get that scope.
We just heard about a very complex Excel sheet, and then Laura, you talked about software doing it. Like, what software are you using for production? If you are at liberty to talk about that, like, do you have any recommendations for planning sprints and doing agile planning?
I do. Like I use pretty much every tool on the planet in my career. Right now I'm kind of stuck with Pivotal Tracker because I love the way it works. And it's basically a very simple tool where you create your user stories in a backlog. And actually, if you book, I did write a couple of guides on how to use that tool specifically. And so basically, you just write the user stories in a nice box, which is a collector of features, so to say. And you can also assign labels and epics on them. And if you assign an epic to something, you can actually have a sub project that's automatically scheduled and planned for it. And you can assign release dates that you basically work a lot with drag and drop. So all the features that are above a release date should be delivered on that calendaristic dates. And everything that's below is not for that release. And that's why I like the software, because if you're late or if you over scope, the release turns red, so you cannot not see it.
Okay.
It's like it screams at you. And then it also has a lot of reports that gives you burn down, that gives you velocity, that gives you all sorts of stuff. But like most software that is available out there for Scrum, gives you all that in a more or less complicated way, like Jira and all those things. And then of course a lot of studios like to use the Microsoft Project, for example. I don't know how popular it is still.
We use that too.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay. But luckily now there are alternatives who are not Microsoft per se, but they have online Gantt chart generators and all sorts of stuff. So there's plenty of tools, like so much software around. You have Trello, you have Asana, you have Basecamp, you have
That's a lot. Like right now, we're working on 2 projects, and one is in cooperation with another company. So we have one project that uses Jira and one project that uses a different software. So now we're switching between softwares for our planning back and forth. Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
stuff out
hard,
there.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
All right. You briefly talked about the workshop that the two of you held last month, Marlene and Tessa. Is that available somewhere? Are the learnings from that available somewhere? Or maybe if not, I see Tessa shaking her head.
No.
Do you have maybe some recommendations for materials people could look at if they are interested in what you were talking about at that workshop? Or is it something that people missed out on?
I think we talked about like holding it again somewhere. So
Oh,
maybe we'll let you know if there's a possibility to do that. But
okay.
currently with
Yeah.
COVID, it's like hard to.
It's a bit harder because of course what we did was also very basically it was just 3 hours to explain all of these things, and if we would have had the chance to explain some of the things a bit more in detail, we would love to do it again. So we do have some material, and we have a book recommendation list as well.
Oh, yeah.
That
Nice.
we can submit to you,
I can,
because yeah, this is basically where we got all our learnings from. Of course, it's also work experience, but that will come for everyone over time. So I don't think that would be a problem. If we would ever have to, we ever have a talk that is very similar to that, we will let everyone know.
yeah. I think it's hard if we just give you like the things we provided, because without explanation, I think it's hard to understand what's going on in all these Excel sheets. I think it would be like, what the heck's going on?
But it's a perfect template to, especially because we did it especially for smaller teams and indies who maybe cannot invest for whatever reasons in expensive software or whatever, and would like to do it in Excel. We wanted to provide this as one of the possibilities, while we also recommended other tools that they can use, but Excel was the focus that we wanted to have.
Okay. I love Excel. It's one of my top
It's
5 programs that
it's
I'm
our
using.
best friend.
Yeah, it's awesome. We are nearing the end of our stream. I have one last question I would like to talk about briefly, and then we can talk about how people can keep in touch with you and contact you, find all your stuff online. Before we do that, we have a lot of young, aspiring game developers and people watching these streams. So maybe some of them are asking themselves, I want to become a producer, but how do I do that? What would be the best way to become a producer? Do I go to university? Do I self-study? Do I just try to get a job? What would be your recommendations for people trying to get into the industry as producers? Do you have any tips? Any best practices, or how did it happen for you? Maybe Tessa, maybe you can start.
I
if you
think
want to.
for me it was just luck, because King Art was looking for producers, and I was actually applying for either production or I don't even know what I was applying for. Marketing, I think. So I was like,
Okay.
hey, I really want to work for you. Do you have something in these two fields? And they were like, yeah, come over. Let's chat. Let's see if that works out.
Nice.
And then they were after the application process, they were like, okay, we're trying that out, but if it doesn't work out, don't be like too sad. So I think it worked out, actually. But I think like producing as like the start of your career is like really unusual, as far as I've heard from other people. So most of the people go into like a field, so you're game designer or something like that, and then you become a lead, and then after some time you maybe become a producer because you're more into like organizing stuff and stuff like that. So I think it's hard to like maybe apply, but I don't know if it's like that easy to get into that field without like that much of experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Laura, do you have any tips for aspiring producers?
Not really, because I don't know how the career roadmap would go, but I'd be guessing that hopefully now there is some education when it comes to producing. When I became a producer, like there was no such thing as like education in that. So I just also it was luck for me as well. So I don't know, but like in general, it's if you have an interest in organizing and planning, and if you know yourself to be good at that, you can tell, because I can tell you all the teams really need this help and this support. So you can just like say, hey, let me help you build a backlog, or I will take care of the comms in this area, or stuff like that. So you can pick up the role like that. And there are like now, for example, I don't know how it is in Germany or in other parts of the world, but I know that there are quite much more openings in production, and junior producers and stuff like that, assistants, and so apply.
All right. How was it for you, Marilena? Did you apply for a producing role, or was it more like Tessa explained?
I was basically in the very same position. So I applied for, it was an internship, so I think that was a bit easier, because I was also lucky that we were about to grow and expand. And King Art was like, okay, let's give it a try to get some young producers on board and try to what do you call it? Teach them
a way,
basically. Yeah, to yes, because it's always easy for a company to when you have people with not super much experience that are still moldable, to get them to work the way you want to and get to know the culture better and so on and so forth, and all with this entire adaptation stuff. And they say, okay, let's give it a try. And so at first I was there as an intern, and that worked out. Apparently I did very small tasks, not really, not the end of the world. But then as a working student I did more research tasks. And then when I went back for full time, it started to, become more and more. So I was in the same lucky position. However, if I have to think about how I would have, approached a studio if I wouldn't have been so lucky, would be that at the very first thing that even helped me, even though I was lucky, was go to networking events. Even if it's like on site or online, it doesn't matter. Back in the day it was on site, maybe it was a bit easier, but it doesn't mean that online it's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? And that really helped me because Jan, my boss, recognized me when I went to the job application thingy, the interview. I was like, oh, we met at DEF CON, didn't we? I'm like, yes. Because I was volunteering there. So awesome. Jens and Tessa, you know what I'm talking about. Volunteering is, I think, a very essential thing to, connect with the industry, get to know the people better. This is a very important thing, to connect with as many people as possible, but also very important, work on yourself and on your skill set, have a portfolio, because this is basically your business card, right? And even if you don't have much experience, when you're a producer that has a lot of experience, a CV might be enough, right? In a younger, more unexperienced position, you want to put more work into a portfolio, into a CV, and try to make it look as best as possible. Try and get feedback, and on top of that, just apply with confidence and try to score for junior positions first, right? Even though they don't offer them, I would have still applied and said, do you need a junior or not? I see you have a senior producer or a normal producer job application out there. I apply either which way and see how it goes.
Yeah. Sometimes when they plan out like for the next project, I think they can like teach you their ways like in the beginning. And if you have some projects like from university or stuff where you did like do like organizational planning work, I put that in my CV and on my stuff, and they were like, "Oh, that's cool. You have experience."
Awesome.
Like
exactly, and really don't be shy, because I know someone who studied movie, like filmmaking, and at the end of his studies, he decided he wanted to enter the games industry. He applied as a junior producer at Limbic. He got the job.
Awesome.
Right? Even though he didn't study games. It's like it's all a matter of, you already have a no, you can always get a yes.
yeah.
Well,
That's
the
great.
the only way to make absolutely sure that your question will not be answered is to not ask it at all.
Exactly.
True.
And this is very wise advice that you are giving. Truly very wise advice. And the only thing that I can recommend is to, in general, what I love about the video games industry is that people are very, very friendly and open and passionate and love their job. So you should never be afraid to reach out to anyone, really, and contact them, no matter how, famous they are or whatnot. Just reach out and ask. The worst that can happen is that you don't get an answer. That's it.
Yeah. And even if they don't answer, most of the time they're as nice as to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that."
Yeah.
Like I've actually never got no reply. Most of the time it was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have a lot to do right now. Maybe you can contact me in a few months, and then we'll see." And I was like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that about our industry as well. Everybody's so friendly and open.
Nice
Which brings
industry.
me to thanking the three of you for being so nice and open to join us tonight. We've already run over time. It feels like we could do another session about landing a job in the games industry. I think there would be a lot to talk about. If somebody from the audience is interested in that, we already had a session like that called Landing a Job as an Artist, which focused on artists trying to get into the industry. And we had recruiters there from Ubisoft and other people talking about either how they landed a job or how they look at people applying for a job. So that's on YouTube on our channel, but this is also going to be uploaded soon. Thank you so much for joining again, Laura, Tessa, and Marilena. If people want to follow you, if people want to learn more about you, where would you like to guide them? Would you have them follow you on Twitter, Instagram, or your blog? Maybe Laura can start. Like, where can people follow you? And maybe if you have a project to plug, this is your chance.
So pronoia.se is where I want people to follow me. That's where I list all my products, and now I'm also building more interactive ways on the website. So I think it's gonna be a blog, and I am active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, whatever. But you can find all the links from the website.
Cool.
Thank you.
Tessa, where can people follow you?
Oh, mine is super easy. Just go on Twitter, and then my Twitter handle is actually written down. It's at pixelproxy, and I'm most active on Twitter, so you can also like contact me via direct message. I'll see that.
I'll follow you right now.
I'll follow you back.
Follow each other now.
Nice. Marilena, where can people find you?
Either LinkedIn or Twitter. Like, these are my two most used social medias.
How are you on
If you
Twitter?
can you call LinkedIn a social? Yeah,
I
kind
think
of.
so.
No,
For
so
business inquiries.
I strongly recommend to everyone that's listening to use the connect function on LinkedIn generously, so to say, and do use social media. Do use DMs on Twitter, whatever works. Just contact the person, and just do it.
Great.
Exactly.
I am Pronoya Games on Twitter. If that makes. But
Let me add you just right now.
Right a second.
All our Twitter handles are on the stream. Like, I think here maybe I don't really know in which direction to point
I see
because
my OBS.
I don't know.
It's right here.
I'm seeing it.
All right, I'm also going to link them on the VOD text description. Thanks again for joining us. The next level game dev session, that's difficult to say, is going to be on January 26th. There's going to be a December break because of Christmas, and we are going to talk about team leadership. So I will be talking to some CEOs from companies, but also team leads on how to lead a team. And I guess we are going to talk about keeping teams happy again and how to maybe have them grow and have them learn from each other, building games in a healthy way, in a happy way, making sure everybody's needs are met. That's what we're going to talk about in the next level session. So I hope you can join us on Twitch or on Discord. Thank you so much for joining us. This was fun.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
Bye bye, Twitch.
Bye.
Bye bye.